Greetings and welcome to this Danish English special report on Muhammad Cartoon's legacy. Is it freedom or fear that drives us? The Danish debate that won't die. It has been 20 years since Jyllands-Posten published 12 drawings of the Prophet Muhammad, images that would ignite global outrage, spark violent protests, and launch one of the most defining debates of our time: where should the line be drawn between freedom of expression and respect for religion? The so-called Muhammad crisis reshaped Denmark's place in the world and tested the very foundation of democratic values. Press freedom, tolerance, and the limits of cultural respect. From Copenhagen to Cairo, from Paris to Islamabad, the aftershocks continue to echo. And here at home, the controversy is once again at the center of public debate. The Danish government's recent push to ensure that schools teach controversial topics such as the Muhammad crisis has sparked intense national discussion. This special report presents a direct analysis of the results from that debate. Should students learn about the Muhammad crisis as a part of Denmark's democratic heritage? Or does revisiting these events reopen wounds and put teachers at risk? In newsrooms, journalists still weigh freedom against fear. In classrooms, educators ask how to teach a story that cost lives and change the global conversation on faith and satire. And in politics, the struggle continues over how far freedom should go and where responsibility must begin. Tonight, we revisit the cartoons that shook the world, explore their lasting impact on Danish society and global politics, and ask, what have we learned from the Muhammad crisis, and what does it still teach us about democracy, courage, and coexistence 20 years on? This is Danish-InfoNews TV, Special Edition, The Muhammad Cartoon's Legacy. 2005, Denmark and the world-shaking cartoons. 12 satirical cartoons featuring the Prophet Muhammad were published in the Danish newspaper Jyllands-Posten on September 30th of 2005. The newspaper wanted to spark conversation about religion, self-censorship, and public discourse, but the results were better than anyone could have imagined. The response was swift and powerful. However, what transpired was far worse than any editor could have imagined, and protests broke out in various locations ranging from Jakarta to London. In the Middle East, Danish embassies were attacked and boycotts of Danish goods spread to countries where the majority population is Muslim. Denmark has had its worst foreign policy crisis since World War II. The global outcry turned a local editorial decision into a flashpoint. The biggest foreign policy crisis to hit Denmark since World War II strained diplomatic relations and necessitated government intervention. Why the Muhammad crisis is so controversial? At its core, the Muhammad crisis represents a fundamental clash between central democratic values, freedom of expression, freedom of religion, and social responsibility, with serious real-world consequences in both Denmark and abroad. The controversy centers on three major points of tension. The first point: the conflict between freedom of expression and free speechdom of religion. The crisis raised a difficult democratic question. Which right weighs heavier, the right to speak freely or the right not to be offended on religious grounds? Freedom of expression. Jyllands-Posten defended its decision as an act of free speech, a cornerstone of democracy that must include the right to mock, satirize, and criticize even sacred institutions. Editor Flemming Rose argued that everyone has a right to be offended. Freedom of religion and religious feelings. Many Muslims view depictions of the Prophet Muhammad as profoundly blasphemous. They saw the cartoons as a grave insult and attack on their identity, reflecting a Western disregard for their faith and dignity. This clash between unlimited free speech and respect for religious belief exposed a deeper value conflict, one that continues to divide societies and shape public debate today. Jyllands-Posten's editors reflected in 2025. The cartoons deserve to be published. They opposed a self-censoring and fear-based culture. The anniversary serves as a reminder that the right to free speech is accompanied by a duty. Danish society was also split by the crisis. The public was divided between those who were worried about inciting violence and those who supported the right to free speech. For many Danes, the cartoons offered a critical perspective on the boundaries of democracy. Now let's look at threats, violence, and the human costs. The consequences for journalists and cartoonists transformed lives. The law enforcement discovered assassination plots between 2008 and 2010, targeting Kurt Vestergaard and other contributors to Jyllands-Posten. Vestergaard was attacked with an axe at home on January 1st of 2010 while he was taking sanctuary in a panic room. December 29 of 2010, a terrorist attack on Jyllands-Posten's offices was foiled by Danish authorities. The ongoing dangers demonstrate that the right to free speech, even decades later, lessons can be accompanied by real-world risks. Many Danish newspapers are still reluctant to reprint the cartoons, which is evidence of the enduring atmosphere of fear. Education and the Muhammad crisis in schools. Education emerged as a key point of conversation as Denmark attempted to deal with the fallout from 2005. To guarantee that students comprehend the Muhammad crisis' historical, cultural, and political significance, the government proposed mandating its teaching in 2025. A Vive survey 2024 to 2025 revealed the challenges. Nearly 50% of teachers had avoided teaching the crisis at some point due to safety concerns. Teachers emphasized the value of teaching autonomy while reporting feeling prepared to handle sensitive topics like gender identity, political upheaval, and Muhammad crisis. The mandate was opposed by the Danish Teachers Union, which warned that requiring content could endanger educators and hinder their capacity to make wise decisions. Social Democratic spokesperson Frederick Vad said, "The Muhammad crisis should be taught to all children. They only learn about the Berlin Wall, the Maastricht Treaty, and the fight for satirical freedom when they avoid history, which makes them uncomfortable and increases their fear." Teachers themselves have mixed views. Some prefer a verbal or visual description without the images, while others show the cartoons to encourage conversation. A teacher from Copenhagen clarified, "I want pupils to understand the value of free speech, but I need to clarify what comes after this point. The dangers seem real, petty. I've heard I have to think about my safety because the renters say they are scared." His struggle draws attention to a significant conflict in education, teaching history and democratic principles without compromising personal security. France 2020, the tragic murder of Samuel Paty. The controversy dangerously reappeared in France 15 years later. In October of 2020, after displaying Muhammad cartoons during a lesson, Educator Samuel Paty was beheaded and killed near Paris due to his advocacy for freedom of expression. This startled Europe and renewed debate over the role of education, secularism, and religious sensitivity. President Emmanuel Macron defended Paty's right to teach. We are not going to back down. Not at all. The right to free speech cannot be compromised. The response was global, driven by social media, campaigns like #BoycottFrenchProducts, boycotts of French products spread throughout the Middle East and North Africa. Leaders such as French President Emmanuel Macron and Pakistani Imran Khan were personally chastised by Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who even recommended that Macron have a mental health examination, which led to France recall its ambassador. The incident highlighted the dangers educators face when teaching sensitive subjects globally and showed how the Danish crisis of 2005 had become a global reference point for conflicts involving freedom of speech. The year 2025 marks the ongoing controversy involving Turkey, France, and Charlie Hebdo, when a cartoon featuring Erdogan lifting a woman's dress while only wearing his underwear was published by Charlie Hebdo in 2025 with the caption, "Erdogan, in private he's very funny, tensions increased." Protests in Bangladesh, Pakistan, and Palestinian territories were sparked by the cartoon, which also reignited calls for boycotts of French products. Goods. In France, opinions were split. Some criticized it as offensive, while others defended it as appropriate satire. The episode demonstrates that the debate over freedom of speech versus religious respect remains unsolved and highly charged decades after the original Danish cartoons. Danish classrooms of today handling controversy. Samuel Paty's murder also impacted Danish classrooms. The following results were obtained from a survey by DR News among 277 high school social studies teachers, revealing a split on whether to show the Muhammad cartoons in lessons about free speech. Roughly half of the teachers had shown the cartoons, the other half had not, while the survey found no major difference between schools with many or few immigrant students. It exposed widespread anxiety about safety. 43 teachers said they were very or quite worried about personal safety. "I never thought it was dangerous to show them," one teacher said, "but I'll be more cautious now, which is really concerning in and of itself." Teach without showing images. One teacher stated, "I can teach about free speech without showing the picture." But the conversation is more significant than the cartoons. Fear must not be allowed to silence history. This situation draws attention to the larger social issue of how to balance the rights and responsibilities of educators with safety concerns, global impacts, and adverse consequences. In Denmark, the controversy surrounding Muhammad's cartoons was not kept under wraps. It has had significant political and diplomatic repercussions over time. Boycotts of Danish and French products in South Asia and the Middle East, French-Turkish Islamic disputes, and the opposition of Muslim-majority countries to Western secularism. The crisis continues to influence discussions about teaching sensitive international subjects, media regulations, and counterterrorism strategies. Scholars claim that the cartoons have even developed into a symbolic touchstone for more extensive conversation about secularism, cultural respect, and the limits of satire. The ongoing discussion, liberty, safety, and education. As a litmus test for democratic cities, the Muhammad cartoons have been referenced in various contexts, including Jyllands-Posten in 2005. The tragic events in France and ongoing diplomatic tensions. Key themes remain. However, where should the line separating free speech and religious freedom be drawn, be captivated, being sedentary? The safety and security of analysts, educators, and cartoonists remain uncertain decades later. Teaching students about controversial historical events while retaining educators and students is one of the educational challenges. Because they spark boycotts, diplomatic crises, and public debate, cartoons have an international political impact. While carefully handling these tensions, Denmark continues to strive for the preservation of free speech, public safety, and historical awareness. Linda Bahr, Tina Petersen, a Danish educator, stated, "The classroom cannot be controlled by fear." It is crucial to teach students about contentious issues if we want them to comprehend democracy. In conclusion, chances for the future 20 years after the original controversy, Muhammad cartoons remain a global touchstone for discussions about education, freedom, and security. We are aware of the following. Consequently, anger and dialogue are required for democracy. Rights and responsibilities must be balanced in societies, even when it is uncomfortable. Education is vital for cultivating understanding. Muhammad's cartoon legacy is more than just history and a vibrant and constantly changing debate surrounding impacts lawmakers, educators, and the general public. We appreciate your interest in Danish-InfoNews TV. Subscribe and enable notifications for in-depth reporting, exclusive stories, and updates on Danish and global news.